Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to see a full house. This is really great. I'm Pam Saltenberger. I'm the president of the Kingsley Art Club, and so I'd like to formally welcome you. We're so excited that we're doing more lectures, even though I think the online was kind of fun, but it's great to be able to have someone speak. So today we have Stephanie Taylor, and William Ishmael will be introducing her formally. But we have a wonderful bonus. After her lecture, Rachel Gottlieb, curator, is going to take you up to the Crocker Kingsley Crocker selection and talk about how they picked those pieces from the big Crocker Kingsley show. And so that will be really fun. I encourage everyone to do that if they can. Our next lecture is March 15th, and it's Paula and Joe Balacera. And so get that on your calendar. We have on our website, we're working on getting it updated. So we have all of the new lectures, and the committee's going to be meeting again. So they're starting out filling up the rest of the year and next year. We're being so good, we have signed up and have been accepted in Big Day of Giving, which is May 4th. And so I encourage all of you, you're going to get a bunch of emails from us, but to donate to Big Day of Giving for the Kingsley Art Club Educational Foundation. And you'll be able to see us on that page as well. And we are also excited that sometime this year, at least 6 months out, we're going to start Evaluation Day again. And this is where you can make a reservation, pay a nominal fee, and have any of your artwork evaluated by a licensed appraiser. And it's kind of a fun day. It's a little antique roadshow, a little bit, but it's really great. So I encourage you to keep an eye out for that. I'm hoping that everyone here is a member of the Kingsley or a docent and getting information about upcoming lectures and upcoming things that we're doing, because lots of things are changing and we're really excited about it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce William Ishmael. He's the on the board, and I think he's behind me. He is behind me. And he's the chair of the program committee. So he's the gentleman that spearheads and puts a lot of these programs together. So, William.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So let me just underline something Pam mentioned, and that is that the program committee is, in the next couple months, is going to start putting together our speakers series for the coming year, for starting in the fall through next spring. And we have quite a disciplined process. But if you guys have any suggestions for speakers you would like to hear, please let any of the Kingsley board members know, me or Pam or any of the board members you know. Now, just a word of warning, just because you suggest the person doesn't mean they'll get selected. We usually start with about 75 to 80 names, and we have to slice that down to the 9 slots that we have available. So it's quite a process. So with that, let me introduce today's speaker, Stephanie Taylor, who I think many of you know. Before I ever knew who she was, I was a big admirer of the mural on the side of the Beers bookstore. And I just thought that was just the most fabulous thing. Well, that's Stephanie Taylor's, as it turns out. I also love the Railroad Museum mural where the train busting through the brick. That's Stephanie Taylor. So she's a muralist, obviously. She's also a ceramicist. She also does installation art. She's also a terrific writer. She has had a column in the Bee for a number of years. She's an issue-oriented person. One of her issues is water. I'm sure she'll talk about that. So with that, let Stephanie Taylor have the podium.
How wonderful. And I stand here as the prodigy of my mother, Theo Samuels, whom some of you knew, and I went down in the basement and found this old archive of way back in the day, Helen and Alan. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the power of these groups and the kind of friendships that developed. And there's my mom, and Theo Samuels and Ruth Rippon and Helen Post and Susan Willoughby and others. I owe a lot to them, and I also owe a lot to my kids, who are also very talented, and there's more and more of them every day. So this is a bit of what drives me. I'm an eclectic artist. I need a high learning curve at all times, kind of like a shark in water. I get a little nervous if my learning curve drops. So curiosity, learning, risk, process, transforming architectural space, solving problems, and more than anything over a long career of 55 years, I think, and still working, adaptation. I've had to be on my toes, and I've had to look ahead. What I'm going to do is, every time you see this placid scene, I spent a lot of time on water. I took up kayaking, is one of those issues that drives me. And so for this, I'm going to start out with a story of risk at the Roosevelt Hotel. And I'm going to read the story, and I'm only going to read two stories. So here we go. 8 black-suited men sat around a conference table at this famous hotel on Hollywood Boulevard. I'd gotten a call from an LA designer just days before, asking that I create a mural sketch and jump on a plane. Site of the first Academy Awards, Clark Gable had danced up and down the stairs with Shirley Temple, mission-style architecture crowned with a cupola and an immense sign overlooking Hollywood's sidewalk of stars. Grauman's Chinese Theater, and the Hollywood sign. Hollywood was a slum when I lived there in 1967. 15 years later, it was still a slum. Celebrities stayed at the Roosevelt, and hookers lingered along the infamous boulevard. So here I was. The client motioned me to a seat on his right. We shook hands, and I slid a sketch to him. He glanced at it and back at me. He said, "Boy, you really know how to crank this stuff out." I looked him in the eye, around the table, and then back at him. From some mysterious place deep inside me came a reply, "You show me a whip, and I'll do anything." He laughed. I laughed. I looked at him and at all the other men, and we all laughed. To this day, I have no idea what inspired me to say something so outrageous to a total stranger, much less a new client and his minions, intuition perhaps. The client was a cross between Pavarotti and Bacchus with appetites to match. He owned hotels in Atlantic City, Pittsburgh, and New York City. With a team of accountants and contractors, his goal was to update this stunning property, hoping that Hollywood Boulevard would transform from a tawdry present to a shining future. It was a long shot. I'd lived in the hills above the boulevard in the late 60s, years of Eldridge Cleaver, Manson murders, peace signs when one joint meant going to jail. I'd lived in LA for 17 years, and I knew LA from Bundy Drive of OJ and Beverly Hills to the industrial heart of downtown. I had no idea, I met Nicole Brown Simpson at a Halloween party, and I had no idea who she was then or what was to become of her. The Roosevelt was notorious, the home base for major and minor celebrities, aging and aspiring. It was a place of contrasts. Events brought old stars like Danny Kaye and newer ones back then, Whoopi Goldberg. Clark Gable and Carol Lombard paid $5 a night to stay in the penthouse at the very top of the hotel. The owner invited me to follow him up a spiral staircase to see the lavish suite where, he said, gesturing, "This is where they slept, and this was their bed." Yeah. And continuing as I was getting nervous, he said, "And those were their sheets." Not communicating my trepidation, I said, "That's great. Thanks for sharing, but I've got to get back to work," and fled before he had a chance to reply. I worked on this $35 million renovation project over the next 2 years, flying back and forth to LA. I created murals and paintings for spaces including the presidential suite and an entire restaurant. One evening I was sitting at the bar chatting with the accountant. We were talking about my current commission, a series of 13 large paintings on paper, and I said something like, "I trust you." And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, "No, don't do that." A month later, I got a letter that the project had declared bankruptcy. I responded that if they didn't send the balance owed for the 13 paintings in process, I'd keep the 50% deposit and the paintings. I never heard from them again. So very much driven by curiosity. This is the first piece that I did for the orchard, and for those of you sensitive to sound. I hitched a ride on the back of a Harley, and as I was traveling along, I had this little tiny camera and I caught this shot. And as a fourth generation Californian, I wondered, who could do this? And why don't I know the answer? And I felt some, percentage of shame. And so I spent days going back and finding the property. And I pitched a story to an editor at the Sacramento Bee, and I ended up writing for them for the next 9 years as a forum contributor, a really incredible experience working with Gary Reed, if you're familiar with where he was. And this was what the front page looked like for my first piece, and he basically let me do anything I wanted. It was fantastic, and it certainly satisfied my level of curiosity to find out what California is all about. And that led, since most of the essays were about water in California, it led to working with Rita Sudman and the former executive director of the Water Education Foundation, for whom I'd done a painting in 1997. This was 2014 by this time, 15. And we ended up collaborating on this book here, right here. And it was an incredible experience. So I'm very much driven by process. And here's an example in Davis. And I'm just going to run through a series of what it's like to present to a client. A series of sketches. That's the bottom sketch right there. That's me. And I actually, in doing a touch-up years later, spent my 65th birthday 3 stories up on the scaffolding thinking, not bad for an old broad. And that was the final project. So I seem to get things in my head that I want to do, and then it might take me years and years to find a way to get it done. But many years ago, for a commission for a huge bank in Southern California, I walked into an airplane hangar with a bunch of old Corsairs, and I ended up doing paintings for that bank. And I got it into my head that I needed to someday take a ride in an open cockpit biplane, which you all know from the valley here as running the crop spring. So here I am, and the question was, what does California look like from an open cockpit 400 feet off the ground at 100 miles an hour? He said as I got, first of all, he wanted to make sure that I was in good enough shape to get into the plane. And secondly, he said, don't put your hand out the window, your watch will come right off. So it was an amazing experience up there for 2 hours. And this is what California looks like. And that's the water going south. And he says during the flight, whatever you do, don't touch those pedals. So this is what a crop duster sees. And then along the lines of curiosity again, Actually, my editor suggested this one around Christmas. What does it take to catch a Dungeness crab? So I headed over to the coast, and the first thing I realized after doing the essay, I will never question the price of crab again. And I caught these guys, not the crab, the fishermen, on a day when the storms were predicted, so they were all in port. Now I'm going to read you this story called The Fisherman. His face was etched with history, leather-bound, rough around the edges. Busy on a boat, I interrupted him. He didn't mind, and after my query that I was curious about the crab fishing industry in California, he invited me on board. I followed into a snug, overly warm cabin, a stark contrast to the chilly hint of rain and cloud-filled sky. Getting ready to go fishing, he said. He introduced himself. He looked older than his 45 years, the sun, the wind, and I guess more than a few years of very hard living. A full head of dark hair matched a neatly trimmed beard. He wore copper bracelets on both wrists, sleeves of a cobalt blue tee pushed up, and an earring in his left lobe. He wasn't a big man, not as big as I thought a fisherman ought to be. He looked a bit like what a pirate might look like, graced with an air of a rebel in blue jeans, a stereotype, a nonconformist, a living on the edges of society, itinerant kind of guy. He confirmed this in degrees, starting with how he began fishing at 21, working near Monterey Harbor. He watched squid boats heading to sea. He had an epiphany, those were his words, and signed on to a sword fishing boat. This was how he learned to fish, infatuated with the challenge of landing 400-pound thrashing swordfish. This is how he learned to listen, he said, and I thought at the time, what an odd thing for a fisherman to say. Listen to what? During a violent storm in 1990, his boat had blown into Bodega Bay after 12 hours straight at the helm. Exhausted, he staggered to the nearest bar and has been crewing for 5 local fishermen families ever since, except for the 10 years he worked as a painter after the trauma of losing 7 friends to the sea in 6 years. We stepped out onto a cozy cabin into the impossibly cramped deck so that he could demonstrate how he catches California's famous Dungeness crab. The season had just started, and he was enthusiastic about the prospects for a year of abundance, including high prices. Most years are a struggle, he said, to meet the needs of a precious young daughter, pay rent, and keep his car running. He lived 20 miles north along the steep cliffs of Highway 1. At the stern, crab traps are piled high 4 and 5, starboard to port. He showed me how he attaches plastic bait traps and identified by uniquely colored buoys. He bent over and with his knees lifted a trap to his thighs and then higher to show how he hurls them overboat at 120 pounds empty. I couldn't lift one past my thighs. He showed me the mechanism that pulls pots up at 6 feet per second, weighing over 400 pounds full, demanding a man's unfailing focus. He'll catch 7 pounds of crab in 2 days, working 18 hours straight. He pointed to pole structures standing like sentries on each side of the mast that descend at a 45-degree angle to stabilize vessels. And he said that overloading can roll a boat. Pots can pull them in to deep depths. 98% of the accidents are caused by human error, he said. He was a cowboy in Texas and a sheet metal worker in San Francisco, but he loved fishing in the sea. It's peaceful, he said. I wake up every morning at 4:30, put on my boots, and look forward to an adventure. He sighed. I leave my problems on the dock. My essay about Dungeness crabs, including his contributions, appeared in the Sacramento Bee in the morning of December 28, 2014. I didn't contact him. I didn't want to bother him if he was fishing. At 9:25 that very evening, this fisherman drove his car off a 75-foot cliff just north of Bodega Bay. The officer who tried to stop him for vehicle equipment violations said, he appeared to accelerate straight off the cliff and made no attempt to stop. So you know, some of you around here, you know what the last few years have been like. And I connected with a woman whose family had lost 2 houses next to each other in Paradise, and which included four generations of memorabilia. So we decided to collaborate. And the question was, to me, what do we retain when we lose? So these are pictures from what I consider to have been a very intimate, strange, contemporary archaeological dig, where we spent 2 days sifting through her family's ashes. The parents were fine, thankfully. These were her father's slides. He was quite a photographer. This is what was left. This was her grandmother's watch, and for me, it symbolized a change in time and sort of an attitude of time's up. So I started these drawings, and the charcoal is actually the burned lumber from their house, the 2x4s. So I drew, and this piece is 7 feet high and 12 feet wide. And this is called Wildfire Wind, and you'll have to look carefully here. And that was the piece when all the, symbolic wind was dripped. And then I turned everything sideways. And this is the installation at Archival Gallery in June 2019. And that, in fact, is the lumber from the family's house. And can anybody guess what these are? Well, I'll tell you. The burned hubcaps from all the cars. So from that, I took it in and did my little digital thing. And this is melted glass from cars. And this was the book that we created together, which has these very short essays by the both of us. And this was an exhibition up at the Sutter Museum in Yuba. And now part of this has gone in this small local museum kind of traveling exhibition, which is very wonderful. So again, it's kind of hard to separate curiosity with me from what I do. But in Norway, I went to, in 2000, with my mom and met about 250 third generation cousins up in Stryn on the fjords, and it was magnificent. And we went up to the glaciers, and it was an amazing experience. And then in 2006, I got a call from my cousin. I have 2 professional artist cousins, and he said, the glaciers are melting, and you better come back because they're not going to last our lifetime. So I went back. I spent a year making a body of work all about in ceramics, all about art, and that piece, which I call Drop by Drop, it's about 6 feet high. So I think I mentioned I get ideas in my head, and I just have to wait for somebody to come along and pay me for them, if I can be crass. So this is my dream client. And I competed against several other sculptors, and I won the piece, the commission. And this is what the place looked like and why I call this quite a transformation. That's from the 2nd floor. So I decided that that small 18 by 6 foot piece was just way too small. So I decided to fill the whole space with these drops. So My throwing partner and I made over 5,000 ceramic pieces by hand. Fortunately, she was a real potter. I am not, because I would have just destroyed my hands. This is my messy studio, and you'll see the Jack London up on the wall there, which you'll see again later. And here are some of the drops. You can tell, I can tell by looking at this which ones she drew through and which ones I threw, but it was okay. So we had a ball together. It was really fun. This might be a good one to just do some marks in.
Yeah.
So everyone's different. And I had a number of people come and help me because this is just a whole lot of work. And some of them signed their names, and each person was encouraged to do whatever they wanted. So it in that installation, if you can look really carefully, you can find a few names. This is an up close. And then that was one part of the installation, but I had to actually create how to get this thing installed, and more importantly, how to make the installation practical for the client and for the engineers. It all had to be engineered. Each piece doesn't weigh much, but nevertheless, it was quite precise. So we made these patterns on the floor, which you'll see what they're for in a minute, and they laser beamed up to the top so that they could hang steel cable. And here's what is represented by those yellow pieces. So these hung from the ceiling first. And they were actually quite strong. We never lost one of them. It's really high ceilings, 24 feet, so better he than I. And what I love about this piece is that from each angle, wherever you are, it's a different view, and I've added a few of those views. I'm also standing above the stairway here, and under the stairs, I took the opportunity to transform that into a water feature. So you will hear, I hope, the sound of water on some of these videos. And then as you go up the stairs, you get a different view. And as you walk down the mezzanine, you get a different view. And this is what the water feature looks like. So if you're ever over by University Avenue and Campus Commons, do stop in, because a lot of people go in and out, and there's a lot of medical facilities, and I feel really good that it brings a sense of calm to the place. This might be one view. And the other factor was that I actually took into consideration are these skylights, so that at different times this weird thing happens. I'm walking, but it almost looks like the piece is turning. And then at different times of the year, the sun either heats the wall or the floor, and creates this different kind of feeling throughout the year or time of day. So part of what I identify with is problem solving, and I guess I haven't said anything about being an artist because I don't know, it's sort of an end product. And as I'm so process oriented, it's sort of the last thing I worry about. I was asked to go down to the Hilton to do a little parking in the garage area to decorate this little pay thing, when you go out and pay. And I got down there, and I looked at the resident manager, and I said, yeah, I can do that, but this is the last thing you need. So I pitched him, and those were the walls above, how the entire place, like 5,000 feet of murals, I think. I don't know, some never really counted it up. And this is what I proposed and executed over 2 years. I did lobby, some reproduction, some other original oil paintings, all about the history of San Francisco, because in this hotel at the time, the late 90s, it was the largest hotel west of the Mississippi except for Vegas. 6,000 people would go to a convention here and never get out into the city. So I wanted to give them a sense of identity and where they were. And in that car there was the general manager at the time, who was old school German hotelier, hospitality general manager, where the guest comes first. And in the middle of the project, that all changed. And now it's all driven by accountants, as is the world. So I proposed doing a combination of ceramic elements that would stick out and murals.
Just going in.
There's a detail and up in Chinatown, the hanging lanterns, and if you look really closely, there's apples that stick out. And it lasted a really long time. I did the ceiling in the middle. It doesn't show a compass rose in the middle. And then I did these two huge ceramic, really detailed gloves for the sports bar. And I went to Gladdy McBean and had them contribute 2 medallions that were at the Coliseum in Los Angeles for one of the Olympics. And this is, as you're driving out, you see one side of the Golden Gate and then the other side. So you're driving over the Golden Gate. So this, if you know Scott Seafood over in Loman's Plaza, this is about transformation as well, because this sculpture has taken so far 3 iterations. It's 7 feet high and 24 feet long, and it was actually one of the most demanding challenges to my IQ that I've ever had. And that's the piece, the first iteration. And then they moved from Loman's to the river, so that had to come down. And now it's in my backyard for quite a long time. And that was the second iteration, where I had to take 2 pieces at 90 degrees and figure out how to make it one piece on a single plane and design the back structure. I thought I'd go nuts. So this is the start of the third iteration here, where we decided to do the traditional fish prints. And they're real fish, and I painted them. And then I took the prints and cut them out and started having, primed out the old second iteration, primed it all out, and then started gluing the tissues onto the third iteration. And here it is. It was so much fun. So much work. Yeah, a lot of work. It's all a lot of work. I don't know. I keep waiting for my children to have meltdowns and go see a shrink at how they put up with a mom. It's, doing what I was doing, but they're all in architecture. No surprise. So this was for the Sacramento Public Library. If you know Rivka Sass, she and I were at a dinner party, and she started talking about how she wanted to do a graphic interpretation of Frankenstein. So I said, I'm in it, you don't get a choice. So here we are. These are the preliminary sketches. I don't know if my son made it in today, but he posed for some of these. He was the monster. It was amazing. She had an editor, but the editor and I didn't see eye to eye because I wanted to very much take out anything in Shelley's story that I could illustrate. I'm not an illustrator, so this was quite a challenge for me and so much fun. And her editor kept saying to me, but if you take out too much, you'll lose Shelley's voice. And I kept saying, if you want Shelley's voice, go read the original. Anyway, this lady and I didn't get along, obviously. Anyway, it was really amazing to me to take a story and try to present it graphically, and then it's also mixed with a lot of text. So then I was faced with the challenge, okay, there's the movie monsters, we know them, but what would the doctor, he wasn't really a doctor, he was a medical student, what would he have gone through to actually build a monster? So I went back to that. How would I build a monster? Starting with what Dr. the Frankenstein did, which was to go to the graves and rob graves for bodies. So this is part one, how to build a monster, and I take a human face and put it over the skull. And here's part two. So one of the things that I've had a challenge along with all of you is adapting to technology. And in 97, I decided, oh my God, I'm a traditional, I'm not really a painter, I'm more of a drawer, but I'm an old style drawer, and now there's computers, and what side of the digital divide did I want to be on? So I had to put a lot of time and effort into learning Photoshop and the technology, and then, of course, since then, it changes every single week. So it's an endless. And one day I visited a friend of mine, and he had an iPad Pro. And I went, God damn it, now I'm going to have to buy an iPad Pro, which I did. The iPad Pro was what made this book possible for me with their budget, or anybody's budget, really, because when you do a drawing, it takes and records every single mark that you make and captures it as a time lapse. And for me, trying to figure out, okay, how do I want this monster to really look? It was not only fascinating to see the time lapse, but I was able to, make an eye, maybe not like it, erase it, redo it, change the nose. You can see that in the time lapse. So back to all the research I did and the questions that the monster asked himself. I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but it's really quite a remarkable story and absolutely timeless for today, or maybe, a couple of years ago. And these are just some conceptual sketches. Okay, how to build a monster, part 3. So I wanted to I started out with long hair because that's how you always see him. But in actuality, he started with no hair, right? And so to show the passage of time, I just kept making his hair longer and longer. And this is one of the ends of the book. And then I'm going to throw in a few more projects here. I'm just going to go really fast. I am a Jack London freak. My great-grandfather was a Superior Court judge in Alameda County and used to throw this guy in jail. And we have this family history. And so I've done projects in Oakland and, onward. I'm a bit of a obsessive. This is the water forum, the start of the sketch, the final painting, and the installation of this huge mural. This is on the side of the Sacramento County Administration. So much fun. And there again, a lot of people paint the Sacramento and the American River, and it pretty much all looks the same. And I spent a lot of time down at the river. I lived at the river just up at Hardin Way for many years. And I thought, what does the river look like if I were an otter? So I had to take my imagination and try to pretend. And there's 29 different creatures in there. And I focused on the otter because kids love otters. Here's a Disney project I painted for Disney for, 87 to 99, 86 to 99. Sometimes people think that people who work on commission, just are doing what other people tell them. But for some reason, because I'm a good salesman, I guess, I don't know, or I'm, whatever, I've been able to establish the amount of credibility where they just leave me alone. And they tell me what they need, what the end result is, and I come back with a solution. And so this was an original for Disney, which was then reproduced in about 750 guest rooms. This was for Disney Institute, Michael Eisner's wife's brilliant idea, which flopped. It was based on Chautauqua, but nobody wants to go to Disney to learn anything. This is a spa, and it's not a big area, so I photographed all my friends. And then I got a call. On the far right there, you'll see a splash, and it was suggested that I show Goofy's feet. And I said, oh, no, I don't think so. No. This is the ballet, and this is kind of again, showing the technology that can help me create. So as I'm painting each 4-foot by 4-foot panel, I take a picture and impose it over the sketch so I can get an idea of what it's going to actually look like. So this is painted on a product called Dye Bond, which is an architectural skinning material, and because I don't like to work on site anymore. These are wonderful people to work for. I had such a wonderful time. I did a whole essay before this for the Bee, and I sat on the floor of all the rehearsals for Peter Pan, and we have limited time, so I didn't include that. You've probably seen this. I've had to get used to losing projects, but at least Kata called me up and told me they were going to have to do this, and I said, okay. This is the River Cats. That's Ruth Rip on there. The bread store, which, out of order here. That's the 16th mural being destroyed. 16th Street, Sutter Club, and I assure you, I'm pretty darn sure I'm the only woman that's actually ever been welcomed into the members bar. at the Sutter Club. And I competed with two guys to get this. I think Susan remembers this. And I went into the first meeting with these guys on the art committee, and I said, okay, guys, I'm going to put you at ease. I don't believe there should be any women in this mural. I think that sold the project. But in fact, there is a woman in the mural. Don't tell anybody. I don't know if you can see it here, but there was always a nude on the opposite wall. And this is actually a reflection. And so reflected is that nude in there, hidden. And Ronald Reagan was the only person living at the time who was really tightly represented. And I'd go to cartoons. I'd go to cocktail parties, and people say, "You will put my family in your mural." And I go, "No, everybody's dead. You know, there's nobody alive that can be recognized, except Reagan." This is an issue of degradation of public art, which happens all over Sacramento. It's certainly, I mean, I've been doing this for 55 years, I think, and so nothing lasts. And I've had 3 lawsuits when it's kind of egregious, including the San Francisco Hilton and the Hyatt here, because we have to stand up for ourselves. And only when I thought it was, you know, a really blatant disregard for artists' rights. There are federal laws and state laws. So I created this in 1999 for the Rail Fair, and it's digital. It was meant to be replaced quite often, which was the point of doing it digitally, and it just never was replaced. And I started getting a little anxious and was just about to call my attorney when I got a call from Wide Open Walls, and they said, "Well, we have some money for you to redo the mural." I said, "Yay!" This is, you know, this was vinyl painted with automotive paint. So you can think if your car's that old, your paint's going to fade, and this faded. But what I did was I simply got up on a scaffolding and repainted the whole thing. And it was really, really quite fun, and was able to actually make a closer match, because the technology, of course, in all those years had vastly improved. This is Fremont Park. I just learned that John C. Fremont was really not very well behaved, and I'm crushed. He did some bad things. So I hope nobody tells the city to take this down. But this is in process, of course, in my studio. It's cast fruit and all kinds of different elements to represent the valley. The city has a contract to maintain the cleanliness and freshness. They have not complied with their contract, and I've talked to them, and apparently, you know, no budgets. So, you know, these are relevant issues. This is the new Science Center. If you walk around the back of it, this was a really incredible job for me because I'd always wanted to do this kind of architectural figurative work. So they laser scanned, not good laser scanning, but bad laser scanning, the 2 figures, and that was just my job to redo the 2 figures. But I had nothing really to go from. It was very much of a guess. That's now installed, and that's what it looks like from behind. And we've come to the end here. All righty. Awesome. Now I think I will walk away from this light.
Join me in saying, wow.
I hear we're supposed to have questions.
Question and answer. So can we have the lights out?
Yep, I'm falling over.
And Scott, you got your mic working?
Got it here. Yep, got it.
So questions for Stephanie?
Don't be shy.
Question?
Back in the back.
My name's Cynthia, but
No, you need to speak into the mic so we record
Were you ahead of the game with the vinyl?
Yeah.
I thought so because
Yeah, the Crocker piece that you saw in the very beginning, I believe I was told by one of the guys here in town, is he believes it's the first fine art application of large-scale vinyl in California, which probably means the United States, for sure. And there was only one company printing that large, Metro Media out of LA at the time, so I think he's probably right. But yeah, it's still a viable way to go, except the printer and the installers make all the money.
What's the year that you did that, the vinyl? The one that you said was vinyl, first vinyl?
97? Yeah, so pretty early. And then the gap in the technology at the time was not the vinyl or the ink, but the installation, the glue. And so the first one that went up, the installer was out of San Francisco. It didn't last, it failed, and they had to come back and they redid it again. So we've actually only replaced it twice. Well, we replaced it the first with that mistake, but then later replaced it again. I'm hoping the Crocker will help me make sure that it is replaced again, because it's probably getting to that point. And yeah.
Where did you go to art school? Or did you go to art school?
I did not for many years. I went to the old art center in Los Angeles part-time. I went back when you could make a living without an art degree. So I started my career in Los Angeles in advertising, and that's when I got into large-scale media, and I did 2 big hand paints on Sunset Boulevard, and I probably did the first braless billboard in the entire world, which is, if you go to my website, there's a cute little story about it, and I'm still in Facebook contact with the photographer, but you know, we wanted her nipples to show, and it was hot that day, and she had to go in and tape little pieces of cotton on her nipples, and also it was one of the first pieces, if not the first, to put a headline on a t-shirt. It was pretty early. Another one?
You were noted as a muralist when we first heard about you, at least for the show. But it's clear that you have multimedia in your background, and the thing that strikes me the most is you've got ideas that are coming out of your spiritual or your creative place that says these are positive ideas, and you've got ideas that are dealing with really negative, heavy subjects that are come out in a creative way that say there is some positive to be found if you look for it. And I just wanted to say I felt what you have done, and it moved me. That's all.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I was going to end the talk with a dystopian view of water, you know, during the drought, and say the end.
Any other questions? Here's a question.
Come on, I love the questions. Don't be shy.
Following up, what's your next project?
Okay, so I did not include a picture of the Amelia Earhart and Friends that I did for the Oakland Hilton in 1991. Long story, including another lawsuit, or the same San Francisco Hilton lawsuit where I stipulated they had to protect that historical mural. It's 30 pioneer aviators that flew in and out of California between 1920 and 1940. So long story short, I got a call from the Aviation Museum, a Smithsonian site lot here in town, and so I'm doing a reinterpretation of that mural, and we're starting with the pioneers, but we're taking it up into the present. And of course, you know, back then there were a lot of female pioneers, so now we get to add other ethnic groups. Yay! Yeah.
One more question. Okay, thank you, Stephanie.
Sure. Thank you all.